I kept my 800K savings hidden from my son. His wife snarled right in my face. Kick this worthless old man out of our house. I smiled quietly, packed my things, and left. 3 weeks later, I wiped their bank accounts clean with one click. She showed up at my door, hysterical, begging, Dad, please give it all back. Who's the poor old man now, Melissa? Before continuing, subscribe to the Cold Revenge channel, as the Sweet Revenge channel will soon cease to exist. Thank you for your attention. My name is Herbert Dawson. I'm 68 years old, living in Phoenix, Arizona. I spent 35 years as a senior accountant for an insurance company. Numbers were my life. Spreadsheets, balance sheets, quarterly reports. I could spot a discrepancy in a 1,000-line document faster than most could count to 10. But all those years reading numbers didn't prepare me for reading people, especially the ones I loved. My son Derek was born when I was 27. The moment that nurse placed him in my arms, red-faced, screaming, absolutely furious at the world, I realized I'd never understood love until that instant. That tiny, angry creature rewrote everything I knew about my heart. We were close, Derek and I. Baseball games on summer weekends, sharing hot dogs in the cheap seats, teaching him to drive in an empty parking lot, helping with homework until midnight. I remember his high school graduation like it happened yesterday. Valedictorian speech, standing ovation, the whole auditorium on their feet. Afterward, he found me in the crowd and hugged me so tight I thought my ribs might crack. Thanks for everything, Dad, he whispered. Couldn't have done it without you. That was the son I raised, the son who disappeared piece by piece over the years that followed. Then he met Melissa, 7 years ago. She walked into his life like a summer storm, beautiful, electric, impossible to ignore. Honey blonde hair, eyes the color of expensive jade, the kind of woman who made entire rooms fall silent when she entered. I understood the attraction immediately, but I saw something else too. Something in the way her smile never quite reached those green eyes. The way she sized people up like items on a clearance rack, calculating their worth, discarding the worthless. The subtle curl of her lip when she learned I was just a retired accountant living off a pension. Oh, she'd said at that first dinner, her voice dripping with something that wasn't quite sympathy. So you're comfortable? That's nice, for someone your age. Comfortable. The word stuck in my throat like a fishbone for weeks afterward. The wedding came 18 months later. Small ceremony, her choice. I paid $14,000 for half of it anyway. Money I never saw again and never once mentioned. That's what fathers do, I told myself. We give. We sacrifice. We don't keep score. But Melissa kept meticulous score. Every dinner, every holiday, every visit, I could see her mental calculator running behind those jade eyes. What was I worth? What could I provide? When would I become too expensive to maintain? The answer came 6 years ago when I retired. Dad should move in with us, Derek suggested one evening. The house is huge. We've got that spare room. He shouldn't be alone. I should have said no. I should have seen Melissa's jaw tighten, the flash of something cold in her eyes before she plastered on that smile. But I was lonely. My wife had passed, and the silence of my apartment had become unbearable. So I said yes. The first year wasn't terrible. Melissa was civil, occasionally warm. I helped around the house, cooking, yard work, repairs. I stayed out of the way, tried to be useful without being a burden. But slowly, like a frog in heating water, the temperature changed. It started small. Herbert, could you eat in the kitchen? We're having guests. Then, maybe stay in your room tonight. It's a couple's dinner. Then Thanksgiving. The guest list was too full for me to join the main table. I ate turkey alone in my room that year, listening to laughter through the wall. I said nothing. Silence can be a weapon. Wait. Watch. Let them reveal themselves. The dinner party that changed everything happened on a Monday. Derek's colleagues from the car dealership where he worked 3 couples, expensive wine, Melissa in a dress costing more than my monthly Social Security check. I'd spent the afternoon preparing appetizers, stuffed mushrooms, my specialty, when she materialized at my elbow. "Herbert," honey poured over ice, "could you maybe not hover? People are trying to have adult conversations." I looked at Derek across the room, carefully not hearing his wife's words. "Of course," I said. "I'll just—" "Actually," the honey had curdled now, "why don't you go to your room for the evening? Better for everyone." I was hoping to meet Derek's co-workers. "Derek!" Her voice cracked across the room like a whip. Every conversation stopped dead. "Derek, are you going to do something? Your father is making our guests uncomfortable." The silence was absolute. My son's face went through embarrassment, guilt, then resignation. He said nothing. "Fine." Melissa's nostrils flared. "I've had enough. This is our house. Derek, tell him what we discussed." He wouldn't look at me, studied his wineglass like it held universal secrets. "Derek!" A hiss now. "Throw this old man out. Do it now." "Melissa," my voice was quiet, calm. "The mushrooms are getting cold." She blinked. Whatever she'd expected, it wasn't that. I smiled at her, the kind that doesn't reach the eyes, and walked to my room. I sat on my bed for a long moment. The pressure in my chest transformed into something colder, cleaner, more useful. I opened my laptop, logged into my investment account. The numbers glowed in the darkness. $847,342.67. 40 years of careful saving. Smart investing. Living below my means. I'd kept it secret from everyone, especially Derek. I'd planned to leave it all to him. My legacy. "Poor old man," I whispered. "That's what you called me, Melissa. Poor old man who can't even afford to live alone." Something had broken tonight, or maybe something had finally mended. This poor old man wasn't going to die quietly in a corner, forgotten and dismissed. Not anymore. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in darkness and let the memories come flooding back like photographs from a box kept sealed too long. Derek at 7, gap-toothed and grinning, holding up a crayon drawing with both hands. "Look, Dad, it's us at the baseball game." 2 stick figures holding what might have been hot dogs, or possibly lightsabers. I'd framed that picture. It hung in my office for 23 years, right next to my monitor. Where was it now? Packed away in Melissa's garage, probably. She'd redecorated the moment I moved in. "Fresh start," she'd said. "No offense, Herbert, but your taste is a bit dated." Derek at 16, face pale as milk, hands trembling. He'd just dented my car backing into the mailbox. Stood frozen, terrified, waiting for me to explode. "Well," I'd said, surveying the damage. "Good news. That mailbox was pretty ugly anyway. Your mother's been after me to replace it for years." He'd laughed so hard he nearly cried with relief. We spent that Saturday fixing everything together, him learning, me teaching. I told him about responsibility, about owning mistakes. What happened to that boy? Where did he go? Melissa hadn't changed Derek overnight. She'd done it gradually, surgically with a sculptor's patience. "Your father's so old-fashioned. Your father just doesn't understand modern life. Your father's holding you back. Drip, drip, drip. Water wearing away stone. Until my son was gone, replaced by a hollow man who couldn't look me in the eye. Morning light crept through my window. Melissa's heels clicked toward the kitchen. Derek shuffled after her like a loyal dog who'd forgotten he was once something more. The kitchen was tense. Melissa scrolled her phone, not acknowledging my existence. Derek hunched over cereal like a man trying to disappear into his breakfast. "Morning," I said. Derek mumbled something. Melissa said nothing. I poured coffee and sat at my designated spot by the window. My accountant's eyes automatically cataloged the paperwork on the counter. Furniture invoice, $4,200 for a new sectional sofa. The old one had been functional. Restaurant receipt, $380. 2 people, a Tuesday night. Salon charge, $150. Melissa's nails were always immaculate. I said nothing, but I noticed. Accountants always notice. We remember. That afternoon, house empty, I found myself in the garage, standing before boxes labeled Herbert's Things, my life reduced to cardboard and tape. I dug through until my fingers closed around a manila folder, yellowed at the edges. Inside, a promissory note from 7 years ago, $320,000, loaned to Derek Dawson for the house purchase, 3% interest annually, payable upon demand. I remembered his flushed face. Dad, I'll pay you back, every cent. It's for family, I told him, but I'd still had it notarized. Legal. Accountants don't deal in handshakes. Then the business loan 2 years later, $75,000 for an investment opportunity. Derek needed a co-signer with good credit. Then Melissa's Lexus, $48,000. Her credit, too damaged for approval. Would I co-sign just this once? I'd hesitated. Some instinct screamed a warning. But Derek looked at me with those eyes, my eyes, that same shade of brown, and I signed. $443,000 total. A house I didn't own. A business deal I'd never seen. A car driven by a woman who called me old man. My hands trembled, returning the folder. Not anger, realization. I'd been sleeping while wolves circled my bed, patient and hungry. That evening I searched. Wong & Associates Attorney Phoenix professional website. Rachel Wong, Escobar Property Law. Contract disputes. I wrote down the number. Next morning I told Derek I was walking. Exercise. Doctor's orders. Sure, Dad. Whatever. The bus downtown took 40 minutes. Rachel Wong's office occupied the 12th floor, all glass and steel. Her handshake was firm, eyes sharp as scalpels. Tell me everything, she said. So I did. The loan. The co-signed credits. Melissa's venom. My son's devastating silence. Mr. Dawson, she said finally, legally, you're extremely strong. The promissory note is notarized, signed, specifies repayment on demand. As for the co-signed loans, you can withdraw as co-signer, triggers complications for primary borrowers. What do you actually want? She asked. Revenge? Justice? Your money? I considered carefully. I want them to understand what they threw away, and I want to walk away with my dignity intact. She smiled, not warmly. Then we need a strategy. Not just a lawsuit, a strategy. Outside, the Phoenix sun beat down. I dialed another number. Trevino Investigations, this is Marcus. Mr. Trevino, I'm Herbert Dawson. I need to know everything about my daughter-in-law. Every secret. Everything she's hiding. A pause. Come by tomorrow. Mesa. I'll text the address. I'll be there. I hung up, feeling sun on my face. The weight of 6 years, humiliations, bitten tongues, swallowed pride, was gone. Something clear and cold had taken its place. The poor old man they'd dismissed and degraded no longer existed. Someone else entirely was taking his place. The coffee shop in Mesa was called Desert Grounds, a small place on the corner of Southern Avenue, the kind with mismatched furniture and baristas who looked like they were writing screenplays between orders. I arrived 15 minutes early. Old habit. Control the terrain before the conversation. Marcus Trevino walked in exactly on time. He was younger than I'd expected, mid-40s, with a cropped haircut that screamed former military or law enforcement. His handshake was brief but solid. Mr. Dawson. He sat across from me, ordered black coffee without looking at the menu. You mentioned your daughter-in-law on the phone. Why don't you tell me what's really going on? I liked him immediately. No small talk, no pretense. A man who understood that time was money and platitudes were worthless. I explained the situation, the house, the loans, the dinner party, Melissa's contempt, Derek's silence, my decision to stop being a doormat. Marcus listened without interruption, occasionally making notes in a small leather-bound book. When I finished, he set down his pen. What exactly do you need from me? Information, I said. I want to know how they live, what they spend, whether they're hiding anything that could be useful if this goes to court. I paused. I'm not looking to blackmail anyone. I want to protect myself legally. He nodded slowly. If they're spending beyond their means while claiming they can't pay you back, that's relevant. Financial patterns tell a story. How much? 2,500 a week. I'll need 2 weeks minimum to build a complete picture. I'd expected more. I agreed immediately. Marcus tucked his notebook away. One more thing, Mr. Dawson. In my experience, people who've been pushed around for a long time, when they finally push back, they sometimes push too hard. Emotion clouds judgment. I'm an accountant, I said. We don't do emotion. We do spreadsheets. He almost smiled. I'll be in touch. That evening, I returned to the house on Thunderbird Road. Melissa was hosting what she called a girls' night. 4 women in expensive athleisure drinking wine that cost more than my grocery budget for a week. I tried to pass through the living room to my bedroom. Melissa's voice stopped me. Herbert. Syrup over glass. We're having a private gathering. Could you use the back entrance? The back entrance? Like a servant or a stray dog? Of course, I said pleasantly. Wouldn't want to disturb anything. I turned to leave, but paused at the hallway entrance. I could hear them clearly from there. So when's the old man finally leaving? One of her friends? I recognized the voice. Real estate colleague. Melissa laughed. Derek promised to have the talk with him this week. Finally. I told him, it's us or your father. Simple choice. Has he been paying rent at least? Please. He barely has Social Security. We've been supporting him for 6 years. The charity case ends now. The charity case. I smiled to myself and kept walking. Once those words would have cut deep. Now they bounced off like pebbles against armor. Every insult was just more fuel for the furnace I was building inside. The next few days, I watched them differently. Not as family, as subjects of study. I noticed things I'd been blind to before. Derek left for work each morning in a suit that cost at least $800. Melissa's closet contained enough designer bags to fund a small country's education system. Their trash was filled with delivery containers from restaurants I couldn't pronounce. They lived like royalty, and they'd convinced themselves that I, the man who'd given them $320,000 for their house, co-signed $123,000 in loans, was the burden on their finances. The audacity was almost impressive. A week passed. Marcus Trevino called. Can you meet? Same place, same time. I was there in an hour. This time Marcus brought a manila folder. Your daughter-in-law is interesting, he said, sliding the folder across the table. She has a credit card in her maiden name, Melissa Crawford. Balance, $18,700. Derek doesn't know about this? Doesn't appear to. The statements go to a P.O. box in Tempe, separate from their shared mail. Marcus pulled out another page. There's also recurring payments to various online retailers. Total, about $340 a month. Subscription services mostly. Luxury items. I flipped through the documents. The numbers danced before my eyes. Familiar language. Clear patterns. She was spending money they didn't have on things they didn't need, hiding it from her husband. This is just the beginning, Marcus said. I found something else, but I need another week to confirm it. Could be significant. How significant? Potentially enough to change everything. I wrote him another check without hesitation. That night, lying in my narrow bed in my small room in a house I'd paid for, I felt something unfamiliar. Anticipation. Not dread, not resignation. Anticipation. Like a chess player seeing the board finally align. Melissa and Derek thought they knew who I was. The quiet old man, the burden, the charity case. They had no idea who I was becoming. The second meeting with Marcus Trevino happened at his office this time, a modest space in a strip mall, professional but unpretentious. He handed me another folder, thicker than the first. Your daughter-in-law took out a personal loan 3 months ago, he said. $12,000 from an online lender. Interest rate, 24%. I winced. That rate was predatory, but Melissa wouldn't have qualified for anything better. What did she use it for? Marcus's expression was carefully neutral. She invested in a business venture with a friend, multi-level marketing company. Candles, apparently. Let me guess. The business failed. Spectacularly. Within 6 weeks. The money's gone. He paused. Total hidden debt. $3,400. Her husband has no idea. I sat back, processing. Melissa had been lecturing Derek about finances, demanding they kick me out to save money, while secretly drowning in debt she'd accumulated through shopping addiction and bad investments. The hypocrisy was staggering and useful. There's more, Marcus said, but this is where it gets sensitive. Are you sure you want to know everything? I need to know everything, he nodded slowly. I'll have a complete report by end of next week, but I wanted to give you a heads up. Some of what I've found could blow up their marriage if it came out. You need to decide how far you're willing to go. I thought about that on the bus ride back to Phoenix. How far was I willing to go? The answer surprised me. I wasn't interested in destroying their marriage. I wasn't interested in humiliation for its own sake. I wanted what was mine, my money, my dignity, my peace. Nothing more, but nothing less either. The next morning I met Rachel Wong at her office. I brought the files Marcus had assembled. She reviewed them in silence, her face revealing nothing. When she finished, she looked up. This is useful, very useful. She set the papers down. Here's what I recommend. We prepare 3 documents simultaneously. She counted on her fingers. 1. A formal demand letter invoking the promissory note. Principal of $320,000 plus 7 years of interest at 3%. Total $367,000. Payable within 30 days. 2. Notification to First National Bank that you're withdrawing as co-signer on Melissa's auto loan. Under the contract terms, they'll have 10 business days to find alternative guarantor, or the loan comes due. 3. Same notification to Valley Commerce Bank regarding Derek's business loan. What happens when the banks get these notices? They'll likely freeze any accounts connected to those loans until the situation is resolved. Standard procedure. She paused. Mr. Dawson, I need to ask you directly. Are you certain about this? Once we send these documents, there's no going back. It will cause significant disruption to their lives. I thought about 6 years of quiet degradation, Thanksgiving alone, being told to use the back entrance like a servant. Throw this old man out. They wanted to get rid of their poor old burden, I said quietly. Let them discover exactly how much this burden was worth. Rachel nodded. I'll have everything ready within the week. We'll coordinate timing so all 3 arrive simultaneously. I left her office feeling something I hadn't felt in years. Control. That evening I returned home to find Derek waiting for me in the kitchen. Melissa stood behind him, arms crossed, face set in an expression of long-suffering patience. Dad, Derek's voice was uncomfortable. We need to talk. Of course. I sat down at my designated table. What's on your mind? He glanced at Melissa. She gave an almost imperceptible nod. Look, Dad, Melissa and I have been discussing things. About the living situation. He cleared his throat. We think it might be better if you found your own place. We'll give you a month to sort things out. Melissa added helpfully, we can help you look at some senior communities. They're very nice these days. Activities, social events. I looked at my son, the boy I'd raised, taught to drive, helped with homework, loved unconditionally, the man who couldn't meet my eyes while evicting me from a house I'd paid for. Something in my chest should have broken. Instead, I felt only a cold, clear certainty. Don't worry, son, I smiled, genuinely smiled. I won't need a month. Derek blinked, confused by my reaction. He'd expected tears, pleading, perhaps anger. Not this calm acceptance. That's good. That's really mature of you, Dad. I've learned a few things over the years, I said, standing up. One of them is knowing exactly when to leave a situation that no longer serves me. I walked to my room, leaving them staring after me. Inside, I pulled out my phone and texted Rachel Wong. Ready to proceed. Send everything. 3 days. In 3 days, the letters would arrive. In 3 days, everything would change. I lay down on my bed and stared at the ceiling, feeling something unfamiliar spreading through my chest. Not anger, not sadness, anticipation. The chess pieces were finally in position, and it was almost time to move. 3 days passed in a strange kind of calm. I went about my routines, morning coffee, afternoon walks, evening reading in my room. Melissa and Derek seemed relieved by my mature acceptance of being evicted. They even became slightly warmer, as if my departure was already complete, and they could afford to be generous now. Poor fools. On the morning of the third day, I woke at 5:30. The house was silent. I packed methodically. 2 suitcases, nothing more. Everything I truly valued fit inside them. My laptop, important documents, a few photographs. The rest was just furniture and memories, and I'd learned that memories travel lighter than boxes. By 6, I was dressed and ready. I carried my suitcases quietly to my car, a modest Honda Accord I'd bought used 8 years ago, paid in cash. Melissa had always sneered at it. "Couldn't you at least get something presentable, Herbert?" she'd asked once. I'd smiled and said nothing. The car ran perfectly. That was all that mattered. I returned to the house one final time. Derek and Melissa were still sleeping. I stood in the hallway for a moment, looking at the home I'd helped pay for. $320,000 of my savings poured into these walls. The kitchen where I'd cooked countless meals. The living room where I wasn't welcome when guests came. The spare bedroom that had become my cell. I felt nothing. That surprised me, actually. I'd expected some pang of loss, some bittersweet nostalgia. Instead, there was only a vast, clean emptiness. This place had stopped being home years ago. I just hadn't admitted it. I left my house key on the kitchen counter. No note. What was there to say? At 8:15, I parked my car on a side street with a clear view of the house. At 8:30, exactly on schedule, a FedEx truck turned onto Thunderbird Road. I watched it stop at 2847, watched the driver carry 3 white envelopes to the front door, watched him ring the bell. No answer. Derek had already left for work. The driver left the packages on the porch. I waited. At 9:12, Melissa emerged in her silk robe, coffee mug in hand. She spotted the envelopes, frowned, picked them up. I could see her face clearly from where I sat, the curiosity, the mild annoyance at morning mail. She opened the first envelope. Read. Her brow furrowed. Opened the second. Her face changed. The coffee mug stopped halfway to her lips. Opened the third. And that's when I saw it. The color draining from her cheeks like water from a bathtub. Her mouth opened, closed, opened again. She looked around wildly as if expecting to see someone watching. She had no idea I was right there, 50 yards away, enjoying the show. I started my car and drove away. The next few hours I spent in a small diner on the outskirts of Phoenix, eating pancakes and drinking endless coffee. My phone sat on the table, silent. I knew the calls would come. The only question was, when? Rachel Wong texted at 11. Documents received by all parties. Notifications sent to both banks. We're in motion. At 2:15, my phone rang. Derek. I answered on the third ring. "Hello, son." "Dad?" His voice was strained, confused. "Dad, what is this?" "I just got a call from the bank. They say there's some problem with my business loan, and Melissa says you sent her some kind of legal letter." "Did she read it carefully?" Dad, she's hysterical. She can't even talk. What's going on?" "The promissory note, Derek. The one you signed 7 years ago. $320,000. Plus interest. That's $47,000 more. I'm calling in the loan." Silence. I could almost hear his brain trying to process the information. But that was family money. You said it was to help us." "I said it was a loan." "You signed a document saying it was a loan, payable upon demand. I'm demanding." "Dad, we don't have that kind of money. You know we don't." Then I suggest you figure something out. You have 30 days. The line went dead for a moment. Then Melissa's voice, shrill, panicked, nothing like her usual honeyed condescension. You insane old man! Do you know what you've done? Our cards don't work. The bank froze our accounts. That would be because I withdrew as co-signer on both your auto loan and Derek's business loan. Standard procedure when a guarantor exits. The bank reassesses the borrower's creditworthiness. I paused. How's that credit score of yours, Melissa? Still in the low 600s? She made a sound like a cat being stepped on. We're going to sue you. We'll take you to court. Please do. My attorney is Rachel Wong and Associates. She's expecting your call. I hung up, paid for my pancakes, and got in my car. The drive to Sedona took about 2 hours. I took the scenic route, windows down, desert air filling the car. Somewhere behind me, in a house on Thunderbird Road, 2 people were scrambling to understand how their world had just collapsed. I found myself humming as I drove. An old song from the 60s, something about sunshine after rain. The desert stretched out before me, red and gold and endless. I'd never felt more free. Sedona welcomed me with red cliffs glowing in the afternoon light. I'd visited here once before, decades ago, and had never forgotten how the landscape seemed designed to remind humans how small their problems really were. I checked into the Desert Rose Motel, a modest place on the edge of town, clean rooms, reasonable rates. The owner, a weathered man in his 70s, looked at me with knowing eyes. Staying long? Possibly, I said. I'm looking for a fresh start. He nodded like he'd heard that story 1,000 times. You'll find it here. Most people do. That first week in Sedona, I established a new rhythm. Mornings, coffee at a local cafe, browsing real estate listings. Afternoons, exploring the town, walking the easier trails, letting the desert silence wash away decades of accumulated noise. Evenings, dinner alone at quiet restaurants, reading paperbacks I'd never had time for. It was peaceful, simple. After 6 years of walking on eggshells, I'd forgotten what peace actually felt like. Rachel Wong called on the 4th day. They've retained counsel, she said. Richard Blake, solo practitioner out of Tempe, specializes in family disputes. Nothing impressive. Any good? Cheap. Which tells you about their financial situation. She paused. He's filed a motion claiming the promissory note was actually a gift, that you never intended it as a real loan. I almost laughed. I have a notarized document with Derek's signature specifying principal, interest, and repayment terms. Exactly? Their position is weak, legally laughable. But Blake will drag this out, hoping you'll settle for less. Her voice hardened. Don't. I have no intention of settling for less than what I'm owed. Good. Blake sent a settlement proposal this morning. $50,000 to make everything disappear. 50,000 out of 367,000. Roughly 14 cents on the dollar. An insult in legal letterhead. My response is no. I'll convey that with pleasure. After I hung up, I thought about Derek and Melissa in Phoenix. The house I'd paid for, the house they'd tried to throw me out of. Were there dishes in the sink? Tense silences or screaming matches? Melissa's composure cracking like cheap pottery. I didn't have to imagine long. Marcus Trevino called that evening. Your son and daughter-in-law had quite a week, he said. Tell me. The bank restrictions hit hard. Any accounts linked to those loans got flagged. Most of their cards. They couldn't buy gas, groceries, anything. Had to borrow cash from Melissa's mother. A petty part of me enjoyed that. Melissa, who'd called me a charity case, begging her mother for grocery money. But here's the interesting part, Marcus continued. They had a real fight. Neighbors heard. About what? Melissa's secret credit card. Derek found out. Probably a bank notification when everything went sideways. 34,000 in hidden debt. He had no idea. I pictured it clearly. Derek's confusion becoming anger. Melissa's defensive fury. What did she say? According to a neighbor, apparently Melissa's not popular on that street, she screamed it was none of his business. Then said, if he'd been a better provider, she wouldn't have needed to hide things. I winced. Cruel even for Melissa. He slept in his car that night, just sitting there, staring at nothing. I should have felt purely satisfied. Part of me did, but another part felt something complicated. Satisfaction mixed with unexpected sadness. Derek was my son. Whatever he'd become, whatever choices he'd made, I'd once held him as a baby, watched him take his first steps, taught him to ride a bicycle while his mother laughed from the porch. Watching his marriage implode because of secrets his wife kept wasn't supposed to bring joy, but watching him face consequences for his choices, for choosing her over me, again and again, year after year, for standing silent while she demanded I be thrown out like garbage, for accepting my money and then treating me like a burden, that felt right. That felt like the scales finally balancing. Keep me informed, I told Marcus. There's one more thing. I found something bigger in my investigation, something that could change everything. But I want to confirm it first. I don't deal in rumors. Give me another week. Take whatever time you need. I'm not going anywhere. I hung up and walked outside. The desert sky was darkening toward purple, stars beginning to emerge like scattered diamonds against velvet. The red rocks faded to shadow shapes against the horizon. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote called, a sound like loneliness given voice. 2 days later, a revised settlement proposal arrived through Rachel. $100,000 this time. Blake's accompanying letter called it their final and generous offer, and urged me to consider the family relationship at stake. I read it twice, savoring the desperation between the lines. They jumped from 50 to 100,000 in less than a week. That meant they were scared. I wrote back one word: no. Let them understand that some debts cannot be discounted. Some betrayals cannot be bought off with 27 cents on the dollar. Some lessons have to be learned the hard way. Rachel called to confirm she'd sent my response. They're going to come back with something higher, she predicted. They're testing how firm you are. I'm as firm as those red rocks outside my window, I said. She laughed, rare from such a serious woman. I'm beginning to enjoy this case, Mr. Dawson. The chess game continued, and I was in no hurry to end it. A week passed, then another. I found a comfortable routine in Sedona. Morning coffee at a place called Red Rock Cafe. Afternoons browsing real estate listings and walking the easier trails. Evenings watching the sunset paint the cliffs in shades of orange and purple that no artist could capture. It was the most peaceful I'd felt in years, maybe ever. The motel owner, Frank, and I had become friendly. He was a widower too, I learned. Lost his wife to cancer 8 years ago. Moved here from California to start over. We'd share a beer sometimes on the porch, watching the light change on the rocks. He never asked about my situation. Good man. Understood that some stories take time to tell? Marcus Trevino called on a Tuesday morning, his voice carrying an unusual edge of barely contained excitement. I confirmed what I found, he said without preamble. You're going to want to sit down for this one, Mr. Dawson. I was already sitting, on a bench outside the cafe, watching tourists photograph the famous rock formations while their children complained about the heat. I'm listening. 3 years ago, your daughter-in-law had an affair with a colleague at her real estate office. Emails, text messages, some photos. She used her work accounts, which was careless. The guy's name is Brad something, married with 2 kids himself. I have complete documentation. My stomach turned. Not because I was surprised. Melissa had always struck me as someone whose loyalty extended only as far as her convenience. But because this information felt like a weapon I didn't want to hold. A weapon that could destroy more lives than just hers. That's not for the court, I said immediately. I'm not interested in destroying their marriage any further than it's already destroying itself. I just want what's owed to me. The money, the dignity, nothing more. I figured you'd say that. You're not the vindictive type. Not about things that aren't your business anyway. Marcus paused. But here's the thing. I kept digging, because that's what you're paying me for. And I found something else, something directly relevant to your legal case. Go on. Remember Derek's business loan, the $75,000 from Valley Commerce Bank for investment in the dealership? I co-signed it. I remember it well. What about it? I tracked where that money actually went, followed the paper trail through 3 different accounts. 25,000 of that loan, a full third of it, was used as a down payment on Melissa's Lexus RX, the same Lexus you also co-signed for separately. I processed this slowly, the accountant in me automatically checking the math, cross-referencing the timeline. So Derek told the bank the money was for business investment, equipment, inventory, whatever he claimed, but actually used a significant portion to buy his wife a luxury vehicle. Exactly right. That's loan fraud. Misrepresentation of loan purpose to a financial institution. It's not a misdemeanor, Mr. Dawson. In Arizona, that's a Class 4 felony. Prison time. Real prison time. Marcus let that sink in. If Valley Commerce Bank found out, they could call the entire loan due immediately, and they would pursue criminal charges. The information sat in my mind like a loaded weapon someone had just handed me without warning. My son had committed a crime, not just a moral failing, not just bad judgment, but an actual crime with actual consequences, and I now held documented proof of it. I'm not going to send my own son to prison, I said quietly. That's not who I am. I didn't think you would. You're not that kind of man. Marcus's voice was matter-of-fact. But here's the strategic reality you need to understand. If Derek knows that you know about this, the entire negotiation changes completely. Right now, they're playing hardball because they think you're just a lonely old man who wants his money back and might eventually accept less. They're counting on your love for your son to make you weak. And if they realize I'm holding evidence of a felony, then they'll understand that you're not weak, that you're holding cards they didn't know existed. Fear, Mr. Dawson, is the most powerful motivator in any negotiation. I stared at the red cliffs in the distance. A family of 4 walked past my bench. Father, mother, 2 young kids laughing about something the boy had said. Normal people living normal, uncomplicated lives. My life hadn't been normal for a long time. Maybe it never would be again. Tell Rachel Wong, I said finally. Have her inform their attorney that we're aware of the misuse of the Valley Commerce loan funds, and that we want a face-to-face meeting to discuss revised settlement terms. No more letters. No more games. Face-to-face. You sure about this path? My son made his choices. All of them. Every single one. He chose to lie to the bank. He chose to let his wife treat me like garbage for 6 years. He chose silence when he could have chosen loyalty. I stood up from the bench, my knees protesting slightly. Now he gets to live with the consequences of those choices, just like I've been living with mine. I ended the call and walked slowly back to my motel room. Something had shifted inside me. Some final remnant of the protective father who would shield his son from any consequence had finally gone quiet. Not dead, just silent, waiting to see what Derek would do next. I'd given my son everything, my savings, my support, my forgiveness, over and over again, my patience, my love. He'd given me a demand to leave the house I'd paid for. This was simply the bill coming due. The meeting was scheduled for the following week at Rachel Wong's office. I drove down from Sedona the night before, staying at a modest hotel near downtown Phoenix. Sleep came poorly, not from anxiety, but from anticipation. Tomorrow would be pivotal. Rachel met me in the lobby at 9:30. Her expression was professionally neutral, but I caught something in her eyes. Satisfaction, perhaps. She enjoyed this kind of work. They're already in the conference room, she said. Blake, Derek, and Melissa. They look nervous. Good. We walked together through the glass doors, down a carpeted hallway, into a conference room with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Derek sat on one side of the long table, Melissa beside him, their attorney Richard Blake at the end. Across from them, 2 empty chairs for Rachel and me. I hadn't seen my son in weeks. He looked older, tired. The confident sales manager had been replaced by something smaller, more uncertain. Melissa, by contrast, looked rigid with controlled fury. Her makeup perfect, her posture aggressive, her eyes shooting venom at me from the moment I entered. "Mr. Dawson?" Blake stood, offering his hand. I shook it briefly. "Thank you for agreeing to meet." "Let's skip the pleasantries," Rachel said, settling into her chair. "Your last offer was $100,000. My client found it inadequate." "We've discussed it further," Blake said smoothly. "My clients are prepared to offer $150,000, payable over 24 months in exchange for—" "Mr. Blake!" Rachel's voice cut through like a blade. "Before you continue, there's something you should know. We have documentation regarding the Valley Commerce Bank business loan." The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. Derek's face went gray. Melissa's hand shot out to grip his arm. "What documentation?" Blake's voice had lost its smoothness. $25,000 of that $75,000 loan was used to make a down payment on a vehicle, a Lexus RX, registered to Melissa Dawson. Not business investment, not dealership improvement. Rachel slid a folder across the table. "Bank statements, transfer records. The paper trail is clear." Blake opened the folder, flipped through pages. His expression tightened. Derek made a sound, not quite a word, more like air escaping from a punctured tire. "That's—" Melissa started. "Loan fraud," Rachel finished. "Misrepresentation of loan purpose to a financial institution. In Arizona, that's a Class 4 felony, up to 3 years in prison." The silence stretched like a rubber band about to snap. "We need a recess," Blake said finally. "Of course. Take your time." They filed out. Through the glass walls, I watched them in the hallway. Blake speaking urgently, Derek with his head in his hands, Melissa gesturing wildly. A marriage under pressure, cracking along fault lines that had been invisible until I applied the right force. 20 minutes later, they returned. The arrogance was gone. Derek wouldn't look at me. Melissa sat rigid, her face a mask of barely contained rage. "My clients," Blake said carefully, "are prepared to discuss alternative arrangements." Rachel nodded. "Here are our terms. Option 1. Full payment of $367,000 within 60 days. "They can't," Blake started. "Option 2, Rachel continued, transfer of the property at 2847 East Thunderbird Road to Mr. Dawson via quitclaim deed. Current market value is approximately $485,000. Mr. Dawson will pay the difference of $118,000 in cash. In exchange, he will not report the loan fraud to Valley Commerce Bank or any law enforcement agency." That's everything," Derek said, his voice cracking. "The house is everything we have." I looked at my son, really looked at him, at the man he'd become, at the choices written in the lines of his face. "You threw me out," I said quietly. "You let her call me a burden. You took my money and treated me like an embarrassment. And when I asked for nothing more than basic respect, you gave me a month to find somewhere else to live." Derek's eyes finally met mine. I saw something there. Guilt, maybe, or just fear. "I'm not being cruel," I continued. "I'm being fair. The house was bought with my money. I'm simply taking back what was always mine." Melissa spoke for the first time since they'd returned, her voice tight with fury. "You're destroying our family." "No, Melissa." I kept my voice level. "You did that. I'm just collecting what I'm owed." Blake cleared his throat. "My clients will need time to consider these options." "They have 1 week," Rachel said. "After that, our offer changes, and not in their favor." We stood. The meeting was over. On my way out, Derek caught my arm in the hallway. His grip was weak, uncertain. "Dad, I didn't know about the loan thing. That was Melissa's idea," she said. "You signed the papers, Derek. You knew exactly what you were doing." I removed his hand gently. "You just didn't think there would be consequences." I walked away without looking back. The desert sun hit my face as I stepped outside. warm and clean and indifferent to human drama. 1 week. In 1 week, I would know if I was getting a house or a check. Either way, I was finally getting justice. The week that followed was the longest of my life, and somehow also the most peaceful. I spent the days exploring Sedona properly for the first time, not as a tourist passing through, but as someone considering making it home. I walked the trails, visited the local shops, sat in coffee houses watching people live their lives. Normal people with normal problems. I envied them a little. On the third day, I found it. A small single-story house on Red Rock Vista Drive, set back from the road with a view of the red cliffs that took my breath away. 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, a wraparound porch facing west, perfect for watching sunsets. The backyard was bare desert landscaping with plenty of space for a cactus garden. The asking price was $395,000. I could afford it easily. I called the listing agent that afternoon and made an offer. Full asking price, cash, no contingencies. She sounded surprised. Are you sure? Most buyers want to negotiate. I'm sure, I said. Some things are worth their price. She promised to get back to me within 48 hours. 2 days later, exactly 1 week after our conference room confrontation, Rachel Wong called. They've made their decision, she said. Her voice carried a note of satisfaction I'd come to recognize. They're taking option 2, the house transfer. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. They agreed? Quitclaim deed to be signed tomorrow at a notary's office in Phoenix. They'll transfer the property to you in exchange for $118,000 in cash, the difference between the home's value and your debt. In return, you agree not to pursue any claims regarding the loan fraud. And the remaining mortgage? There's about $87,000 left on it. That transfers to you as well, but given the home's current value of around $485,000, you're still coming out significantly ahead. The math was simple. I was getting a house worth $485,000 in exchange for forgiving a $367,000 debt, plus paying $118,000 cash. Net gain, the house, free of the debt that had hung over this family for 7 years. When and where? I asked. Tomorrow, 2 o'clock, Miller & Associates Notary Services on Central Avenue. She paused. Mr. Dawson, I want you to know, in 23 years of practice, this is one of the most satisfying outcomes I've ever achieved for a client. Thank you, Rachel, for everything. Thank yourself. You had the courage to demand what was yours. Most people don't. The signing was scheduled for 2 o'clock the next day. I drove down from Sedona that morning, arriving in Phoenix with time to spare. The city looked different now. Not hostile, just irrelevant. A place I'd lived, a place I'd suffered, a place I was leaving behind. The notary's office was clean and professional. Beige walls, corporate art, the smell of printer toner. Rachel was already there when I arrived. A few minutes later, Derek and Melissa walked in with Richard Blake. They looked defeated. There was no other word for it. Derek's shoulders slumped like a man carrying invisible weight. His suit was wrinkled. The first time I'd ever seen my appearance-conscious son look less than perfect. Melissa was worse. The polish was gone. Her makeup couldn't hide the dark circles under her eyes, and her famous composure had cracked into something brittle and hollow. Let's proceed, Blake said quietly. The notary, a middle-aged woman with efficient movements, laid out the documents. Page after page of legal language that boiled down to something simple. The house on Thunderbird Road was becoming mine. Derek signed first. His hand trembled slightly as he wrote his name. He still wouldn't look at me. Then Melissa. She grabbed the pen like a weapon, signed with angry slashes, then threw it down on the table. This isn't over, she hissed at me. You think you've won, but... Melissa. Rachel's voice was sharp. Unless you want to discuss the Valley Commerce situation further, I suggest you complete the signing in silence. Melissa's mouth snapped shut. The color drained from her face. I signed last. My signature was steady, clear. Herbert Dawson, written the same way I'd signed 1,000 documents over my career. Congratulations, Mr. Dawson, the notary said, stamping the final page. The property transfer is complete. I looked at my son. He was staring at the table, jaw tight, eyes wet. Derek, I said quietly. He looked up. For a moment, just a moment, I saw the boy I'd raised, the gap-toothed kid with the crayon drawings, the teenager I'd taught to drive, the young man who'd hugged me at graduation and promised to make me proud. That boy was still in there somewhere, buried under years of bad choices and worse influences. I never wanted it to end like this, I said, but you made your choices. So did she, and choices have consequences. Melissa grabbed Derek's arm. Let's go. Now. They left without another word. Through the window, I watched them walk to their car, Melissa's Lexus, ironically, the car I'd co-signed for, the car that had been part of the fraud that sealed their fate. My phone buzzed, a text from the real estate agent in Sedona. Offer accepted. Congratulations on your new home. I smiled. For the first time in what felt like years, I genuinely smiled. The drive back to Sedona felt different, lighter. The highway stretched through the desert like a ribbon of possibility, and every mile put more distance between me and the life I was leaving behind. I closed on the house 3 weeks later. The sellers were a retired couple moving to Florida to be closer to grandchildren. People with normal families, normal relationships, normal love. We shook hands at the closing table, and they wished me well. Beautiful spot you're getting, the husband said. We raised our kids there. Lots of good memories. I'd make my own memories now. The house was everything I'd hoped for. Small enough to be manageable, large enough to feel like home. The porch faced west, and on my first evening there, I sat with a cup of coffee and watched the sun paint the red cliffs in shades of orange and gold that no photograph could capture. I thought about the math. Accountants always think about the math. The Phoenix house sold quickly for $492,000. After paying Derek the $118,000 we'd agreed upon and covering the remaining $87,000 mortgage, I cleared $287,000. Add that to my original savings, minus Rachel's fees of $15,000 and Marcus's investigation costs of $7,500, and my total assets now exceeded $1.1 million. I was, technically speaking, a millionaire. The poor old man Melissa had sneered at for 6 years was worth more than she and Derek would likely accumulate in their entire lives. Not that I cared about the numbers anymore. What mattered was simpler. I had my dignity back. I had my freedom. I had a home that was truly mine. The first week was quiet, unpacking boxes, arranging furniture, setting up my small cactus collection in the backyard. I found a spot for each of my 47 specimens, carefully positioned to catch the morning light. On my third day in the new house, the doorbell rang. I opened it to find a woman about my age standing on the porch, holding what appeared to be a homemade pie. "Welcome to the neighborhood," she said, smiling warmly. "I'm Gloria Ramirez. I live 2 houses down. Herbert Dawson." I accepted the pie, apple, from the smell of it. "This is very kind of you. I remember being new here. Everyone needs a friendly face." She tilted her head. "You moved alone?" I did, yes. "Retired?" "For a few years now," she nodded, something like understanding in her eyes. "Well, Herbert, if you ever need anything, directions to the best restaurants, recommendations for a good doctor, someone to share coffee with, I'm just down the street. I might take you up on that." After she left, I ate a slice of her pie. It was delicious. The following Saturday, I found the local chess club. They met at a community center on the edge of town, a dozen players of varying skill levels, mostly retirees like myself. I introduced myself, played 3 games, won 2. The regulars seemed pleased to have fresh competition. "You're good," said my final opponent, a former engineer named Walter. "We meet every Saturday. Hope to see you again." "You will." Life, I was discovering, could begin again at 68. It just required leaving the right things behind. One evening, about a month after I'd settled in, My phone rang. I looked at the screen. Derek. I stared at the name for a long moment. The phone buzzed insistently in my hand, demanding attention. I thought about answering. Part of me wanted to. The part that still remembered teaching him to ride a bicycle, helping him with algebra homework, standing in the audience at his graduation with tears in my eyes. But another part of me remembered the dinner party, the demands that I leave, the 6 years of being treated like an embarrassment, a burden, an old man who'd outlived his usefulness. The phone kept ringing. I pressed the power button. The screen went dark. Some conversations could wait. Some conversations were no longer necessary. Some relationships had already said everything they needed to say. I walked out to my porch, settled into my favorite chair, and watched the sun begin its descent toward the red cliffs. The sky turned gold, then orange, then a purple so deep it looked like a bruise healing. Somewhere in Phoenix, my son was dealing with the consequences of his choices. He and Melissa were probably living with her mother now, trying to rebuild from nothing. Maybe their marriage would survive, maybe it wouldn't. That wasn't my concern anymore. I'd spent 40 years giving everything I had to my family. I'd spent 6 years being punished for it. Now I was spending whatever time I had left on myself, my home, my peace, my life. The sunset faded into twilight. Stars began to appear, one by one, like lights coming on in a vast and empty house. I sat there until the sky went dark, feeling nothing but gratitude. Not for revenge. Revenge was too small a word. For justice, for freedom, for the simple truth that some stories do have endings that make sense. I'd written my own ending, and it was exactly what I deserved. If you liked this story, please like this video and subscribe to the Cold Revenge channel, as the Sweet Revenge channel will soon cease to exist. Also, share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the field on the left. Thank you for watching.